What if I told you that a cleaning lady with no college degree saved a $250 million company from complete collapse, and nobody saw it coming? Before we dive into this incredible story, please drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from, and later give this story a rating from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The icy December wind cut through Chicago's streets like sharp blades, making the city's skyscrapers tremble under the force of the approaching storm. Sarah Johnson adjusted the scarf around her neck and looked up, admiring the imposing structure of Millennium Tower, where she had worked every night for 4 years. The 60-story building rose against the dark sky like a needle of glass and steel, its illuminated windows creating a hypnotic pattern in the night. At 28, Sarah had the kind of intelligence that shone in her dark eyes. Even when no one bothered to look, she was practically invisible to the executives who rushed through the corridors during the day, just another night cleaning staff member from the outsourced company that kept the building running. But Sarah saw everything, heard everything, and more importantly, understood much of what she saw and heard. Another night, another battle, she murmured to herself as she swiped her ID card at the employee entrance reader. The marble lobby echoed with the sound of her footsteps, amplified by the silence that took over the building after 6 p.m. Sarah had grown up in Bronzeville, a predominantly African-American neighborhood on Chicago's South Side. The daughter of a mechanic and a seamstress, she had always been good with machines and circuits. As a child, she would take apart old radios and put them back together, often improving their performance. Her father, Robert, used to joke that she had golden hands and a mind that worked like a computer. But life hadn't been kind to the Johnson family. When Sarah was 16, her father suffered a car accident that left him with permanent spinal damage, unable to work. Her mother, Patricia, took on 2 jobs to support the family, and Sarah had to abandon her dreams of studying engineering to help financially. "Education is a luxury we can't afford," her mother had said with tears in her eyes, "but that doesn't mean you can't learn." And Sarah learned, on her own, through the internet, free online courses, YouTube videos, pirated e-books. She absorbed knowledge like a sponge, specializing in electronics, programming, and computer systems. By 24, she knew more about technology than many college-educated engineers. But without a degree, doors remained closed. The cleaning job at Millennium Tower came through a temp employment agency. "It's nighttime," the clerk had explained, "and the pay is decent. You work alone without much contact with other people." Perfect, Sarah had thought. She could work and study at the same time. What she didn't expect was to discover that the building housed Cortex Solutions, one of Chicago's most promising financial technology companies. The company had been founded 5 years earlier by 2 former Goldman Sachs executives, Michael Thompson and Jessica Williams, who developed a revolutionary algorithm to detect fraud in financial transactions in real time. Cortex occupied floors 45 to 50 of the building, and Sarah quickly became fascinated by the technology that kept the company running. During her nightly rounds, she observed the humming servers, the working cooling systems, the blinking lights on equipment. To others, they were just noisy machines. To Sarah, they were like a beating heart, keeping the company's life functioning. It was a Tuesday, December 18th, when Sarah first noticed something was wrong. She was cleaning the 47th floor, where Cortex main data center was located, when she heard a different sound. The servers were working harder than normal, and the cooling system seemed to be struggling to maintain adequate temperature. Sarah stopped what she was doing and approached the climate control system's control panel. She shouldn't have been looking. Technically, it wasn't her responsibility, but her natural curiosity was stronger. The numbers on the display showed that the room temperature was 3 degrees above the normal recommendation for sensitive electronic equipment. "Interesting," she murmured, taking her phone out of her pocket to make some notes. She had developed the habit of documenting everything she observed during her work, a practice born from her meticulous nature and her thirst for knowledge. Over the following days, Sarah discreetly monitored the systems. The temperature continued to rise gradually, and she began to notice other worrying signs. Some servers were making strange noises, as if they were straining too hard. The status lights that normally blinked in constant green occasionally showed yellow warning flashes. On Thursday, she decided to investigate further. Using her self-taught knowledge and some online research during her breaks, Sarah began to understand what was happening. The cooling system wasn't working properly, and the servers were beginning to overheat. She knew she should report her observations, but to whom? She was just an outsourced cleaning employee. Who would believe her? And more importantly, who would care about the opinion of someone who in the company's eyes didn't even exist? Sarah decided to continue monitoring the situation. She started arriving at work earlier and making extra rounds through Cortex floors, always with the excuse that she needed to clean something. Her observations became more systematic. She recorded temperatures, noises, light patterns, everything in a small notebook she carried in her pocket. It was on Friday that she made the most alarming discovery. Sarah was finishing her round of the 48th floor when she heard voices coming from a conference room. Normally the building was empty after 7 p.m., but sometimes some executives stayed later for important meetings. She tried to ignore it and continue her work, but something in the urgency of the voices made her stop. "The third quarter numbers are concerning," said a male voice she recognized as Michael Thompson, Cortex CEO. "We need TransGlobal's mega transaction on Monday to maintain our projections." "I know, Michael," replied a female voice, Jessica Williams, the CTO, "but the system is working perfectly. There's no reason for concern." Sarah approached discreetly, pretending to clean the hallway near the conference room. She didn't intend to eavesdrop, but the information she was hearing connected directly with her observations from the past few days. "How much are we talking about?" asked another voice, probably the CFO. $250 million, Michael replied. "It's the largest transaction we've ever processed. If everything goes well, we'll have enough resources to expand to the international market. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong," Jessica interrupted. "Our systems are redundant. We have backups of backups." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had spent the past few days observing exactly the systems that would process this monumental transaction, and she knew something was very wrong. If the servers were overheating now, with normal workload, what would happen when they had to process a $250 million transaction? She needed to understand the problem better. After the executives left, Sarah headed to the main data center. Using a master key she had borrowed from the maintenance supervisor months ago, and which he never noticed was missing, she entered the server room. The heat hit her immediately. The temperature was at least 5 degrees higher than it should be. Sarah examined the equipment more closely, using her phone's flashlight to illuminate specific areas. That's when she saw it. Small drops of condensation forming on some electrical connections, and more worryingly, signs of corrosion on some critical components. She took discrete photos and made more notes. Then, using her knowledge of cooling systems, she began to trace the air conditioning route. What she discovered left her even more alarmed. The problem wasn't just with the cooling system. It was with the design of the data center itself. When Cortex had moved into the building, they made modifications to the climate control system to accommodate their high-performance servers. But the modifications were poorly executed. The airflow wasn't optimized, creating hotspots where heat accumulated, and the condensation drainage system had a design flaw that was causing moisture buildup. Sarah knew she was facing a time bomb. The servers were operating under increasingly critical conditions, and when Monday's mega transaction overloaded the system, there would be a catastrophic failure. Sarah spent the entire weekend researching and calculating. She used online simulators to model the cooling system, consulted technical forums to better understand the risks of server overheating, and studied similar cases of critical system failures. Her conclusions were frightening. Based on her calculations, there was a 78% probability that Cortex main servers would suffer a catastrophic failure during Monday's transaction. The overheating would cause not only the interruption of the transaction, but also the loss of critical data and potentially permanent equipment damage. For a company that depended 100% on its technological infrastructure, this would be devastating. Cortex would not only lose the $250 million transaction, but would also face lawsuits, loss of market credibility, and probably bankruptcy. Sarah knew she needed to do something. But what? She was a cleaning employee from an outsourced company. She had no official access to the systems, no recognized technical credentials, and no contacts within the company. Who would believe her? She considered her options. Report to her supervisor at the cleaning company. But he probably wouldn't understand the gravity of the situation and would simply refer her to the building's maintenance department, which had no jurisdiction over Cortex equipment. Try to contact Cortex executives directly. But how? She didn't have access to their direct contacts, and any attempt at communication through official channels would be filtered by assistants who wouldn't give importance to a cleaning employee, cause an accident that would force an investigation. She could shut down the cooling system or cause a small failure that would draw attention to the problem. But this could be interpreted as sabotage, and she would lose her job and possibly face criminal charges. Try to solve the problem herself. She had enough technical knowledge to make some temporary corrections, but this would require unauthorized access to the systems and could also be considered sabotage. Do nothing. Let fate take its course and hope that Cortex's own technicians would discover the problem in time. Sarah spent Sunday night awake, weighing her options. She thought about her family, her own career, the personal risks she would face, but she also thought about Cortex employees, the people who would lose their jobs if the company went bankrupt, the investors who would lose their savings. And then she thought of something her father always said, "Honey, when you have the knowledge to prevent a tragedy, you have the responsibility to act." Sarah arrived at work on Monday with a plan. She had spent all of Sunday preparing a detailed technical presentation about the problem, complete with diagrams, calculations, and proposed solutions. She had also researched Cortex executives, their schedules, their routines. Her plan was simple but risky. She would intercept Michael Thompson or Jessica Williams when they arrived at the office Monday morning and somehow convince them to listen to her concerns about the servers. The problem was that she worked the night shift and normally left at 6 a.m., while executives arrived around 8 a.m. She would need to find an excuse to remain in the building. Sarah decided to discover a leak in the 47th floor bathroom that would require her immediate attention. She reported the fictitious problem to the maintenance supervisor around 5:30 a.m., explaining that she would need to stay to wait for technicians who would come to fix the leak. At 7:45, she was strategically positioned in the lobby of the 45th floor, wearing her cleanest cleaning uniform and carrying an improvised briefcase made with a clipboard and some documents. She had mentally rehearsed her approach dozens of times. At 8:15, the elevator doors opened and Michael Thompson stepped out, talking on the phone and carrying a coffee cup. Sarah felt her heart race. It was now or never. "Mr. Thompson," she said, approaching him, "sorry to interrupt, but I need to speak with you about a critical problem with the servers." Michael stopped, clearly surprised. He looked at Sarah, noticing her cleaning uniform, and frowned. "Sorry, you are—" "Sarah Johnson. I work in night cleaning here in the building for 4 years. Mr. Thompson, I know this might seem strange, but I discovered a serious problem with the server cooling system that could cause a catastrophic failure today." Michael looked around, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, you need to talk to the maintenance people about this. I can't—" "Mr. Thompson, please," Sarah interrupted, her voice gaining urgency. "I know about the $250 million transaction you're going to process today. I know this is critical for the company's future, and I know your servers are going to fail." This caught Michael's attention. He hung up the phone and looked at Sarah with a serious expression. "How do you know about the transaction? I heard you talking on Friday night, but that's not important now. What's important is that I spent the last few days monitoring your systems, and there's a serious problem with the cooling system that will cause overheating during the transaction." Michael was silent for a moment, processing what he had heard. "You're telling me that a cleaning employee is monitoring our systems?" "I know how this sounds," Sarah said quickly, "but I have technical knowledge. I studied engineering on my own. I can prove what I'm saying." Michael looked at his watch. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes. 5 minutes, Sarah insisted. "Give me 5 minutes to show what I discovered, and then you decide if it's worth investigating." Michael hesitated. Something in Sarah's intensity, the conviction in her voice, made him stop. "All right, 5 minutes." Sarah followed Michael Thompson to a small meeting room on the 45th floor. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened her improvised briefcase, but her voice remained firm and clear. "Mr. Thompson, over the last 4 days, I documented abnormal temperatures in the main data center. The average temperature has been 3 to 5 degrees above recommended for critical equipment," she began, showing her handwritten notes. "This alone is already concerning, but the problem is deeper." She took out her phone and showed the photos she had taken discreetly. "This is evidence of condensation on electrical connections and signs of corrosion on critical components. This indicates that the cooling system is not just inadequate, but that there are structural problems in the data center design." Michael examined the photos, his expression becoming more serious with each image. "Continue." "I analyzed the cooling system layout," Sarah continued, showing a diagram she had drawn. "When Cortec moved into this building, the modifications made to the climate control system created hotspots where heat accumulates. Additionally, the condensation drainage system has a design flaw that's causing moisture buildup." She turned to a page with detailed calculations. "Based on the heating pattern I observed and the normal server workload, I calculated that a significant system overload, like what would be caused by a high-volume transaction, would result in a catastrophic failure with 78% probability." Michael was silent for a moment, studying the numbers. "These calculations, where did you learn this?" "I studied on my own. Online courses, books, technical documentation. I know I don't have a formal degree, but I understand these systems. And you're telling me that our transaction today will cause server failure?" "Not just a failure," Sarah said, her voice becoming more intense. "A catastrophic failure. Data loss, permanent equipment damage, and potentially a fire if the temperature rises enough. Mr. Thompson, this isn't just about losing the transaction. This is about the company's survival." Michael looked at his watch again. The 5 minutes had become 10. I need to call our technical team. Can you repeat this presentation for them?" "Of course," Sarah replied, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. "But, Mr. Thompson, what time is the transaction scheduled?" "Noon." Sarah looked at her watch. It was 8:35 a.m. That gives us less than 4 hours. Depending on the complexity of the problem, it might not be enough time for a complete solution. Michael pulled out his phone and started dialing. "Jessica, I need you to come down here now. We have a situation with the servers." "No, it's not a false alarm. I'll explain when you get here." He hung up and looked at Sarah. "You're about to speak to some of the smartest people in the tech industry. They'll ask difficult questions and will be skeptical. Are you sure you're prepared for this?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Mr. Thompson, I've spent the last 4 years observing these systems every night. I know every noise, every pattern, every anomaly. I may not have a degree, but I know what I'm talking about." "I hope so," Michael said, "because if you're right, you may have saved our company. And if you're wrong—" "I'm not wrong," Sarah said with conviction. "I just hope it's not too late to do something about it." Jessica Williams entered the meeting room with an expression that mixed curiosity and irritation. She was a 40-year-old woman with short black hair and penetrating eyes, known for her sharp intelligence and little patience for wasted time. "Michael, what is this?" "I have a meeting with investors in an hour," she said, stopping abruptly when she saw Sarah. "Who is she?" "Jessica, this is Sarah Johnson. She works in night cleaning here in the building, and she brought some concerns about our servers that I think you need to hear." Jessica looked at Sarah with an expression of disbelief. "You're telling me you interrupted my morning to listen to a cleaning employee talk about our systems?" Sarah felt blood rush to her face, but maintained composure. "Miss Williams, I know my profession might seem irrelevant to you, but I have technical knowledge and observed critical problems in your systems." "Technical knowledge?" Jessica laughed sarcastically. "Do you have engineering training, data center experience, technical certifications?" "No," Sarah admitted, "but I have 4 years of daily observation of your systems and the ability to analyze data and identify patterns." Jessica crossed her arms. "Michael, this is ridiculous. We have a team of highly qualified technicians monitoring our systems 24/7. If there were a problem, they would have detected it." "Maybe," Sarah said calmly, "but your technicians monitor the systems remotely through software. They're not physically on the floors every night, listening, observing, feeling the changes in the environment. Feeling? Jessica repeated with disdain. Yes, feeling. When you work with machines every day, you develop an intuition about when something is wrong. A different noise, an abnormal vibration, a change in temperature. Your sensors might not capture these nuances. Michael intervened. Jessica, at least look at the data she collected. 5 minutes. Jessica sighed and sat down. All right, 5 minutes. But after that, I want her out of the building. Sarah opened her briefcase again and began her presentation. This time, she was more prepared for interruptions and skeptical questioning. These are the temperatures I recorded over the last 4 days, she began, showing her data table. You can verify with your own monitoring systems. Jessica took out her phone and made some checks, her eyebrows furrowed. The temperatures are slightly elevated, but still within acceptable parameters. Acceptable parameters for normal operation, Sarah corrected, but not for overload. And observe the trend, the temperature is rising consistently. She showed the photos of condensation and corrosion. These are signs that the cooling system isn't managing to maintain adequate humidity. This can cause short circuits. Minor condensation is normal in cooling systems, Jessica said, but her voice had less conviction now. Not in this pattern, Sarah replied, and not with signs of corrosion. This indicates there's moisture buildup in areas where there shouldn't be. Sarah then showed her cooling system diagram. The fundamental problem is here, she said, pointing to a specific area. When you modified the building's original climate control system, you created a bottleneck in the airflow. Hot air isn't being evacuated efficiently, creating hotspots. Jessica studied the diagram. How do you know about our system modifications? I observed technicians working when you moved in here. I ask questions to maintenance staff. I pay attention. And you drew this from memory? Yes, I have good visual and spatial memory. Jessica was silent for a moment, clearly processing the information. Even if all this is true, our systems have redundancies. If one server fails, others take over the load. Not if the failure is caused by overheating, Sarah said. Heat spreads. If one server overheats, it will affect adjacent servers. And if you're processing a critical transaction when this happens, the failure can spread throughout the system before redundancies can be activated. Michael looked at Jessica. She has a point. Our redundancies are designed for isolated hardware failures, not for systemic failures caused by environmental conditions. Jessica was clearly struggling between her skepticism and the logic of Sarah's arguments. Even if you're right about the problems, how can you be sure they'll cause a failure during our transaction today? Sarah turned to her calculations page. Based on the heating pattern I observed and the normal server workload, I calculated that a 400% overload in processing capacity would result in a temperature increase of 8 to 12 degrees in hotspots. 400%? Jessica asked. The $250 million transaction requires real-time processing of thousands of microtransactions, fraud verification, data validation, simultaneous backup. That's approximately 400% of the system's normal load. Jessica did some mental calculations. Even if your numbers are correct, a 12-degree increase wouldn't be enough to cause catastrophic failure. It would be if the base temperature is already 5 degrees above normal, Sarah replied. That would put some critical components at 43 degrees Celsius, which is the thermal failure point for several of the processors you use. The silence that followed was palpable. Jessica looked at Michael, who was clearly worried. I need to verify this, Jessica said finally. I need my technical team to validate these numbers. How long will that take? Michael asked. At least 2 hours for a complete analysis. Michael looked at his watch. The transaction is in 3 hours. Then you have a decision to make, Sarah said. Risk the transaction with potentially compromised systems or postpone it until you can solve the problem. Jessica stared at her. You're suggesting we postpone a $250 million transaction based on the analysis of a cleaning employee? I'm suggesting you don't ignore evidence just because you don't like the source, Sarah replied calmly. Michael banged on the table. Call the technical team now. I want a complete system analysis in 1 hour. The meeting room quickly filled with core-tech technicians and engineers. Sarah felt small and out of place among the people in expensive suits, with degrees from prestigious universities, but she knew her analysis was correct. Jason Parker, the technical infrastructure director, arrived first. He was a 35-year-old man with a red beard and an attitude that made it clear he didn't like having his expertise questioned. "So," he said, looking at Sarah with disdain, "you're the cleaning employee who thinks she knows more about our systems than we do." "I don't think I know more," Sarah replied. "I know I observed problems you might not have noticed." "Our monitoring systems are state-of-the-art," Jason said. "They alert us to any anomaly." "Your monitoring systems are software-based," Sarah replied. "They only detect what they're programmed to detect. They can't feel an abnormal vibration or hear a different noise." Amanda Lee, the senior systems engineer, joined the conversation. "Even if there are small anomalies, our systems are designed to handle it. We have redundancies and backup systems." Sarah opened her briefcase and showed the diagrams again. "Your redundancies work for isolated failures, not for systemic failures caused by environmental conditions. If the problem is overheating, it will affect multiple systems simultaneously." Jason crossed his arms. "All right, let's suppose you're right about the temperature problem. What's your solution?" Sarah turned to a page she had prepared during the night. "Short-term solutions. You can decrease server load by redistributing processing to systems in other locations. You can also temporarily increase cooling using portable air conditioning units." "That's not possible," Amanda said. "We don't have other data centers with enough capacity to process a transaction of this size." "Then you need a medium-term solution," Sarah continued. "You can postpone the transaction for 24 hours and use that time to implement cooling system corrections." Jason laughed sarcastically. "Postpone a $250 million transaction. Do you have any idea what that would cost? The contractual implications? Do you have any idea what it would cost to completely lose the transaction and still have to deal with equipment damage and lawsuits?" Sarah retorted. Michael intervened. "Enough discussions. I want you to do a complete system analysis now. Temperature, humidity, workload, everything. I want concrete numbers in 45 minutes. The technical team left the room, some of them murmuring among themselves. Sarah heard Jason say to Amanda, "This is ridiculous. We're going to waste time validating theories from a janitor." Jessica stayed in the room with Michael and Sarah. "While they do the analysis, I need to know more about you," she said to Sarah. "How did you really learn all this?" Sarah told her story, about growing up in Bronzeville, about her father's accident, about having to abandon college dreams to work, about years of self-education through the internet. "I was always good with machines," she explained. "As a child, I would take apart old radios and televisions. My father taught me about engines and circuits. When I started working here, I became interested in computer systems. I spent my breaks reading about technology, watching tutorial videos, taking free online courses." "Online courses about what?" Jessica asked. "Electronics, programming, systems architecture, industrial refrigeration, data analysis. Anything that could help me better understand what I saw here every night." Michael leaned forward. "You said you've been observing our systems for 4 years. Have you seen other problems before?" "Small problems, yes. Sometimes I noticed strange patterns, but never anything as critical as this, and I never knew how to report or if anyone would take me seriously." "Why did you decide to speak up now?" Jessica asked. Sarah hesitated. "Because I heard you talking about the $250 million transaction. I knew that if the systems failed during that transaction, it would be devastating for the company. I thought about all the employees who would lose their jobs, the families that would be affected. I couldn't stay quiet." Jessica and Michael exchanged glances. "Even knowing this could cost you your job?" Michael asked. "Especially knowing that," Sarah replied. "If I did nothing and you found out later that I knew about the problem, I couldn't live with myself." 45 minutes later, Jason Parker returned to the meeting room with a somber expression. Amanda Lee was right behind him, carrying a laptop and a stack of papers. "Well?" Michael asked. Jason cleared his throat. We found some anomalies." "What kind of anomalies?" Jessica asked. Amanda opened the laptop and showed a series of graphs. The temperatures are indeed elevated in several areas of the data center, not enough to trigger our automatic alerts, but consistently above ideal. How much above? Sarah asked. 3 to 5 degrees, exactly as you said, Jason admitted reluctantly. And humidity? Sarah continued. Also elevated at certain points. We found evidence of condensation on some critical connections. Jessica leaned forward. Does this mean Sarah was right? Amanda hesitated. It means she identified real problems that our monitoring systems didn't adequately detect. But that doesn't prove there will be a catastrophic failure, Jason added quickly. These are problems, yes, but not necessarily critical. Sarah took the laptop and examined the graphs. Can I see the server workload data? Jason reluctantly switched to another screen. Sarah studied the numbers for a few moments, doing mental calculations. Based on this data, during today's transaction, the load will increase from 23% of capacity to 87% of capacity, she said. That's an increase of 278%, not 400% as I had estimated. So your calculations were wrong, Jason said with a tone of triumph. No, Sarah replied. My calculations were conservative. This means the temperature increase will be 6 to 8 degrees, not 8 to 12. Which still puts some systems at critical risk, Amanda said, doing her own calculations. Sarah nodded. With the base temperature already 5 degrees above normal, an additional increase of 6 to 8 degrees would put several critical components at 39 to 41 degrees Celsius. What's the thermal failure point? Michael asked. For main processors, 42 degrees, Amanda replied. For storage systems, 40 degrees. A tense silence fell over the room. Sarah could see realization spreading across the executives' faces. So she was right, Jessica said finally. There's a real probability of failure during the transaction. Not a probability, Jason corrected. A certainty. If these numbers are correct, we're going to have storage system failures almost certainly. Michael looked at his watch. The transaction is in 2 hours. What are our options? We can postpone the transaction, Amanda suggested. For how long? Michael asked. Depending on the solution, from 24 hours to a week. That's not an option, Michael said. The contracts have severe penalties for delays, and our investors are expecting this revenue. Then what's the alternative? Jessica asked. Sarah leaned forward. There's a temporary solution that might work. All eyes turned to her. What? You can decrease the load on the main servers by distributing part of the processing to other systems, not to other data centers, but to secondary servers right here in the building. Our secondary servers don't have capacity to process a transaction of this size, Jason said. Not alone, Sarah agreed, but if you break the transaction into smaller components and process each component sequentially, instead of simultaneously, the load can be distributed. Amanda frowned. That would significantly increase processing time. How much time are we talking about? Michael asked. Instead of 45 minutes, probably 2 to 3 hours, Sarah estimated. That's still acceptable, Jessica said. Better than losing the transaction completely. But there's another problem, Jason said. Breaking the transaction into sequential components introduces failure points. If something goes wrong in the middle of the process, it could be difficult to reverse. Not if you implement checkpoints, Sarah said. Save the system state at each step. If something goes wrong, you can revert to the last checkpoint. Michael looked at his technical team. Is this feasible? Amanda and Jason exchanged glances. It's possible, Amanda said hesitantly. But it would be a significant modification to our standard protocol. How long do you need to implement this? Michael asked. At least an hour to program and test, Jason replied. That gives us an hour margin, Jessica said. Not much, but it's feasible. Sarah raised her hand. There's one more thing. You need to temporarily improve cooling during the transaction. How? Michael asked. Portable air conditioning units. Position 3 or 4 units strategically in the data center to create additional airflow in hotspots. Where are we going to get portable air conditioning units in 1 hour? Jessica asked. Sarah smiled. I know some people. Sarah pulled out her phone and called her cousin Kevin, who worked at an industrial equipment rental company on the south side. Kev, it's Sarah. I need your help urgently, she said. I need 4 high-capacity portable air conditioning units. I need them here in downtown in 1 hour. Sarah, that's impossible, Kevin replied. I would have to… Kev, it's an emergency. An entire company could go bankrupt if I don't get these units. I'll pay whatever is necessary. There was a pause. How much can you pay? Sarah looked at Michael, who nodded. $5,000 if you can deliver in 1 hour. 5,000? Sarah, what the hell are you doing? Saving jobs. Can you do it? I'll have to use the company truck and get the units from 2 different locations. It'll be tight, but I can try. Thank you, Kev, you're an angel. Sarah hung up and turned to the group. The units will be here in 1 hour. $5,000? Jason asked. It's a fraction of what you'd lose if the transaction failed, Sarah replied. Michael nodded. Approved. Now, let's work on the software solution. The next hour was a frantic race. Cortex's technical team worked feverishly to modify their transaction protocols, while Sarah coordinated the delivery of the air conditioning units and helped plan their strategic positioning. Put 1 unit here, she said, pointing to a specific spot in the data center. This area has the most heat buildup based on the patterns I observed. How can you be sure? Amanda asked. Because I spend 4 hours a night here for 4 years. I know where the air gets hottest, where there's less circulation, where servers work most intensively. At 11:30, the air conditioning units were positioned and running. The temperature in the data center had dropped 2 degrees in 30 minutes. It's working, Jason admitted. The temperature is stabilizing. At 11:45, the technical team finished programming the new sequential transaction protocol. Ready, Amanda announced. We tested with simulated data and it worked perfectly. Michael looked at his watch. The transaction starts in 15 minutes. Everyone ready? Sarah stood up. I'm staying to monitor the systems during the transaction. You don't need to… Jessica began. Yes, I do, Sarah interrupted. I know these systems better than anyone. If something goes wrong, I'll notice first. Michael nodded. She stays. Noon. Cortex control room was tense with anticipation. Sarah positioned herself near the temperature monitors, watching the numbers with laser attention. Starting transaction, Amanda announced. First component, identity validation. The servers began to work. Sarah watched the temperature rise gradually. 29 degrees, 30 degrees, 31 degrees. Temperature stable, she reported. First component processed successfully. Second component, fraud verification, Amanda continued. The load increased, the temperature rose to 33 degrees. Still within safe parameters, Sarah said. Third component, fund transfer. This was the most intensive part of the process. The temperature rose rapidly. 35 degrees, 37 degrees, 38 degrees. Careful, Sarah warned. We're approaching the limit. Fourth component, confirmation and backup. The temperature hit 39 degrees and continued climbing. Sarah felt her heart race. 40 degrees, she announced. We're at the limit. How much time left? Michael asked. 2 minutes, Amanda replied, sweat dripping down her face. The temperature reached 41 degrees. Sarah could hear subtle changes in the sound of the servers. They were working at their limit. 41 degrees, she said. 1 more degree and we start having problems. 1 minute and 30 seconds, Amanda said. The temperature oscillated between 41 and 42 degrees. Sarah held her breath. 42, she whispered. At that moment, an alarm sounded. One of the secondary servers had begun to overheat. Transfer the load from that server, Sarah shouted. Already doing it, Amanda replied, her fingers flying over the keyboard. 30 seconds, she announced. The temperature in the critical server began to drop as the load was redistributed. Sarah watched the numbers. 41 degrees, 40 degrees, 39 degrees. Transaction complete, Amanda shouted. Total silence dominated the room for a moment, then exploded in celebration. Michael hugged Jessica, the technical team congratulated each other, and Sarah allowed herself a smile of relief. $250 million processed successfully, Michael announced. No data loss, no equipment damage. Jason approached Sarah. I need to apologize. You were right, and we were wrong. If you hadn't alerted us about the problem, we would have suffered a catastrophic failure. No need to apologize, Sarah said. You were doing your job, I just had a different perspective. Jessica joined them. Sarah, I need to ask you a question. Would you like to work for Cortec? Sarah blinked, surprised. What do you mean? As a systems engineer, we can sponsor your formal education if you want, but frankly, you've already demonstrated more practical knowledge than many of our employees with degrees. I don't know what to say. Michael approached. Think about it. You saved our company today. You deserve an opportunity to use your talents properly. Sarah looked around the room at the people who just hours before saw her as just an invisible cleaning employee. Now they looked at her with respect and admiration. I need to think, she said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course, Michael said. Take the time you need, but the offer will remain open. 3 days later, Sarah was sitting in the kitchen of her family's small apartment in Bronzeville, telling the story to her parents. Her father, Robert, listened with eyes shining with pride. Honey, I always knew you were special, he said. But this is incredible. Are you going to accept the offer? Her mother, Patricia, asked. I don't know, Mom. It's scary. I'd be working with people who studied at Harvard and MIT. What if I'm not good enough? Sarah, her father said seriously, you just saved $1 million company using knowledge you learned on your own. Do you think people from Harvard could have done that? They could have prevented the problem from the beginning with better design, Sarah replied. But they didn't prevent it, Patricia pointed out. They created the problem and you solved it. That means you see things they don't see. Sarah knew her parents were right, but fear still consumed her. She had spent the last few years being invisible, watching from afar. The idea of being seen, of having responsibilities, of being judged by college-educated colleagues was terrifying. Her phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Sarah, it's Michael Thompson. I hope you don't mind that I got your number. No, that's fine. What can I do for you? Actually, I called to tell you something. Remember I said our transaction was critical for expanding internationally? Yes. Well, based on the success of Monday's transaction, we just received a proposal to manage all financial transactions for the European Union for one of the world's largest retail networks. We're talking about $2 billion a year. Sarah felt her stomach knot. That's incredible. It is. And Sarah, this was only possible because you saved us on Monday. If we had failed in that transaction, we never would have received this opportunity. You didn't just save our company. You transformed it. I don't know what to say. Have you thought about our offer? Sarah looked at her parents, who were obviously curious about the conversation. I'm still thinking. Can I make a suggestion? How about you come work with us for a trial period? 6 months. If you don't like it, or if you feel it's not suitable, you can go back to what you were doing before. No commitment. And if I'm not good enough? Michael laughed. Sarah, you identified a critical problem that our $1 million monitoring systems didn't detect. You developed a real-time solution that saved a $250 million transaction. You coordinated resources and led a team of graduate engineers. If that's not being good enough, I don't know what is. Sarah took a deep breath. 6 months. 6 months. And Sarah, we'll pay for you to go to engineering college if you want, not because you need it, but because you deserve it. Monday, December 23rd. Sarah stood in front of Millennium Tower, but this time she wasn't carrying cleaning equipment. She wore a new suit, bought with a generous salary advance from Cortec, and carried a leather briefcase. She took a deep breath and entered the building, this time using the main elevator instead of the service elevator. When the doors opened on the 45th floor, Jessica Williams was waiting. Welcome to the team, Jessica said, extending her hand. Thank you, Sarah replied, shaking hands firmly. Ready to see your new office. Sarah followed Jessica through corridors she knew so well, but everything seemed different now. People greeted her, recognized her. She was no longer invisible. Here it is, Jessica said, opening the door to an office with windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Your own space. Sarah entered and was impressed. The office was small, but it had a modern desk, 2 computer monitors, and an incredible view of the city. I have my own office? Of course. You're a senior systems engineer now. By the way, there's something on your desk." Sarah approached the desk and saw a nameplate. Sarah Johnson, Senior Systems Engineer, Cortex Solutions. Next to the plate, there was a letter. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it and see." Sarah opened the letter and read aloud. "Dear Sarah, on behalf of the entire Cortex team, we would like to express our gratitude for your dedication and expertise. Your work saved our company and the jobs of 150 employees. As a small token of our appreciation, we've included a bonus of $50,000. Welcome to the team. Sincerely, Michael Thompson, CEO." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. $50,000. "You saved a $250 million company," Jessica said. "That's a bargain." Sarah sat in the chair of her new office, still processing everything. "I can't believe this is happening." "Believe it. And Sarah, this is just the beginning. We have big plans for you." "What kind of plans?" "Well, first, you're going to lead a project to review all our monitoring systems. We want to implement the kind of practical observation you did across all our data centers." "You want me to teach other people to do what I did?" "Exactly. We're calling it the Johnson Monitoring Program. You'll train engineers to combine technical analysis with physical observation." Sarah smiled. "Johnson Monitoring Program? Do you have an objection?" "No, it's perfect." Jessica headed for the door. "Your first meeting is in an hour. You're going to present your report on the cooling problem to the board of directors." "I'm going to present to the board?" "You're the expert on the subject. Who else should present?" After Jessica left, Sarah was alone in her new office. She looked out the window at the city that had always been her home, but which now seemed full of new possibilities. Her phone rang. It was her mother. "Honey, how was the first day?" "Mum, I have my own office, with a view of the city." "Oh, I'm so proud. Your father is here too. He wants to talk to you." Her father's voice came on the phone. "Sarah, I always knew you would do great things, but this is more than I could have dreamed." "Dad, I'm scared. What if I can't do it? What if I fail?" "Honey, you've already proven you can do this. Now you just need to believe in yourself like we've always believed in you." Sarah looked at the nameplate on her desk. "I'll try, Dad. I'll try." June 2025. Sarah was in Cortex main conference room presenting the results of her first major project to a group of executives from various technology companies. "The Johnson Monitoring Program," she explained, "combines traditional technical analysis with systematic physical observation. Our engineers now make regular rounds through data centers, not just to check equipment, but to use all their senses to detect anomalies." She clicked to the next slide. "Over the last 6 months, we've implemented this program in 5 different data centers. The results have been remarkable. 67% reduction in unscheduled failures, 45% reduction in maintenance costs, and 23% increase in overall system efficiency." An executive raised his hand. "Miss Johnson, how do you train engineers to do this type of observation?" "It's a combination of technical education and sensory training," Sarah replied. "We teach engineers to recognize patterns of sound, vibration, temperature, and even odor that indicate potential problems. We've also developed a series of checklists that systematize the observation process." "And this really works?" another executive asked. "Let me give you an example," Sarah said. "Last month, one of our trained engineers noticed a slightly different odor in one of our servers. It wasn't something our monitoring systems would detect, but it indicated that a component was beginning to overheat. We replaced it preventively and avoided a failure that would have cost $2 million. The presentation continued for another 30 minutes, with Sarah confidently and expertly answering complex technical questions. When she finished, she received enthusiastic applause. After the presentation, Michael Thompson approached. "Sarah, I have a proposal for you." "What kind of proposal?" "Several companies have asked if you'd be willing to consult for them, helping implement similar programs. We're willing to release you half-time for consulting work." Sarah was surprised. "Consulting work? You've developed a unique expertise. There's a real market for this. You could make a lot of money, and help many companies at the same time. I need to think about it. Of course. But Sarah, you should know we also want to promote you. We're creating a new position, Director of Systems Innovation. You'd be in charge of developing new methodologies for monitoring and maintaining critical systems. Sarah felt a wave of emotion. Director? You more than deserve it. You transformed the way we think about systems monitoring. You saved our company and created millions of dollars in value. It's time for you to be properly recognized. December 2025. Sarah was back on the 47th floor of Millennium Tower, but this time she was conducting a tour for a group of engineering students from the University of Illinois, where she had begun giving lectures on innovation in critical systems. This is the data center where it all began, she explained to the students. A year ago, I was a night cleaning employee who observed these systems every night. Today, I'm Cortex Director of Systems Innovation. A student raised her hand. Miss Johnson, how did you go from cleaning employee to director in just 1 year? Sarah smiled. I never stopped learning. I never stopped observing. And when I saw a problem that could affect people, I chose to act instead of staying silent. But weren't you afraid to speak to the executives? Another student asked. I was terrified, Sarah admitted, but I learned that the fear of failure is less important than the fear of not trying. She guided the group to a new section of the data center. This is our new integrated monitoring room. Here, we combine automated monitoring with systematic human observation. It's the result of the program I developed based on my experience as a cleaning employee. Do you think you would have developed this program if you had started as a traditional engineer? A student asked. Sarah considered the question. Probably not. Being invisible gave me a unique perspective. I observed systems in a way that traditional engineers don't observe. I didn't have preconceptions about how things should work, so I could see how they really worked. What's your advice for us? A student asked. First, never underestimate the value of practical observation. You can have all the degrees in the world, but if you don't pay attention to what's really happening around you, you'll miss important things. And second, the student asked. Second, don't be afraid to question experts. I questioned engineers with degrees from prestigious universities because I knew I had observed something they hadn't. Trust your experience and knowledge, even if other people don't immediately recognize your value. And third, another student asked. Sarah looked around the data center, remembering her first nights cleaning these same corridors. Third, remember that innovation often comes from unexpected perspectives. People who are invisible, cleaning employees, maintenance technicians, administrative assistants, often see things that other people don't see. Listen to those voices. 15. Full Circle, December 2025. Sarah was back on the 47th floor of Millennium Tower, but this time she was conducting a tour for a group of engineering students from the University of Illinois, where she had begun giving lectures on innovation in critical systems. This is the data center where it all began, she explained to the students. A year ago, I was a night cleaning employee who observed these systems every night. Today, I'm Cortex Director of Systems Innovation. A student raised her hand. Ms. Johnson, how did you go from cleaning employee to director in just 1 year? Sarah smiled. I never stopped learning. I never stopped observing. And when I saw a problem that could affect people, I chose to act instead of staying silent. But weren't you afraid to speak to the executives? Another student asked. I was terrified, Sarah admitted, but I learned that the fear of failure is less important than the fear of not trying. She guided the group to a new section of the data center. This is our new integrated monitoring room. Here we combine automated monitoring with systematic human observation. It's the result of the program I developed based on my experience as a cleaning employee. Do you think you would have developed this program if you had started as a traditional engineer? A student asked. Sarah considered the question. Probably not. Being invisible gave me a unique perspective. I observed systems in a way that traditional engineers don't observe. I didn't have preconceptions about how things should work, so I could see how they really worked. What's your advice for us? A student asked. First, never underestimate the value of practical observation. You can have all the degrees in the world, but if you don't pay attention to what's really happening around you, you'll miss important things. And second, the student asked. Second, don't be afraid to question experts. I questioned engineers with degrees from prestigious universities because I knew I had observed something they hadn't. Trust your experience and knowledge, even if other people don't immediately recognize your value. And third, another student asked. Sarah looked around the data center, remembering her first nights cleaning these same corridors. Third, remember that innovation often comes from unexpected perspectives. People who are invisible, cleaning employees, maintenance technicians, administrative assistants, often see things that other people don't see. Listen to those voices. December 2029. Sarah Johnson stood at the top of Cortex Solutions' new building, an 80-story skyscraper that had become one of Chicago's most recognizable landmarks. As Vice President of Innovation and Development, she had supervised the design of all the building's critical systems, implementing from the beginning the principles she had developed years ago. Miss Johnson, a young voice called her. Sarah turned and saw a woman of about 25 wearing a cleaning uniform. Yes? I'm Emma Davis. I work in night cleaning here. I heard your story about how you started. Sarah smiled. Ah, yes. How can I help you? Emma hesitated, looking nervous. I noticed some strange things with the elevators. Small things that maybe the technicians haven't noticed. I don't know if I should say something. Sarah felt a familiar wave of recognition. What kind of strange things? Well, there's a different vibration in the east side elevator during the early morning hours, and sometimes I hear a noise like something is scraping. The technicians say everything is normal, but you know something is wrong, Sarah completed. Yes. How did you know? Sarah put her hand on Emma's shoulder. Because I've been exactly where you are. Emma, would you like to show me what you observed? Emma's eyes lit up. You would take me seriously? I always take practical observations seriously, especially from people who know the systems better than anyone. Let's take a look. As they walked toward the elevators, Sarah thought about how the world had changed. The Johnson monitoring program was now implemented in more than 200 companies around the world. She had written 2 books on innovation in critical systems, had given lectures at prestigious universities, and had been recognized as one of the 40 most influential young leaders in technology by Fortune magazine. But perhaps most important was what was happening at this moment, a young cleaning employee being heard and taken seriously for her unique expertise. Emma, Sarah said as they entered the elevator, have you ever thought about studying engineering? I always wanted to, but Emma hesitated. I don't have money for college. Well, it happens that Cortec has a scholarship program for employees who demonstrate technical aptitude, and it also happens that we're always looking for people with your observation skills. Emma stopped, surprised. Are you serious? Completely serious. Emma, 5 years ago, I was exactly where you are now. I know the value of what you bring to the table. The question is, are you ready to take the next step? Emma smiled, and Sarah saw in her the same spark of determination she had felt years ago when she decided to approach Michael Thompson in that corridor. Yes, Emma said with conviction, I'm ready. Sarah nodded, feeling that the circle had completed. Then let's begin. Sarah Johnson's story demonstrates that innovation and expertise can come from unexpected places. Sometimes the most invisible people are those who see most clearly. In a world that often values credentials over practical knowledge, Sarah proved that careful observation, determination, and courage to speak up when something is wrong can transform not just a life, but an entire company. Cortex Solutions continued to grow and became one of the world's leading financial technology companies, always remembering that its greatest innovation didn't come from a sophisticated algorithm or new technology, but from the unique perspective of a cleaning employee who refused to remain invisible when lives and jobs were at risk. And somewhere in Chicago, a young woman named Emma Davis is beginning her own journey, proving that some of the best stories are those that repeat themselves, one generation at a time.